everybody. Welcome to Midsummer Scream 2018. Thank you for being here. How many of you have been here since we opened today? All right. How many of you just got here and are like, hey, I'll check out a Halloween convention? All right, that's great. How many of you came all the way from Maryland to see this? Right there in the front row. A fan, a dedicated fan. Thank you for being here. Well, thank you guys. This is the final performance of the Theater Macabre for the day, but we're going to have performances tomorrow. This is really exciting. I've got to know these guys actually, even though I have no connection to them whatsoever. And they're super nice for one thing, super talented, and we've seen the crowds grow every year, and now it's capacity crowds, so give yourselves a round of applause. Besides the East Coast, who else is a fan of Midnight Marinara? All right, make some noise, that's great. If you're not now, at 7 o'clock when this panel is done, you will all be fans of these guys. So give it up for Midnight Marinara!
Good evening, intrepid listeners, and welcome to Midnight Marinara. Have you ever tried to prove a point to someone with a recording? Say, your spouse talks in their sleep, your brother snores, and they never, there we go, they never believe you. They always say, prove it. So you say, okay, I'm going to set a tape up. I'm going to record this. I'm going to prove it to you once and for all. What we're about to present to you right now is one of those tapes with a very interesting change to it.
Connection established. Connection established.
Are you there?
Yes, seems like a strong signal tonight. Let's see how long that lasts.
They've almost got the kinks worked out.
They've almost had the kinks worked out for months now.
No, really. They say 1 or 2 more cycles and no more random disconnects.
Right.
Physical control is already intermittent.
What?
No, really. You just have to try.
Couldn't even twitch.
Well, I said intermittent.
Anyway, time's short, even if we don't get cut off. So, what's the situation?
Well, first off, we worked out the exact staging for this sector. Nighttime, of course.
What about law enforcement?
We'll have them by then.
Okay. And the military?
No one's going to call them.
Right. So, casualties.
We're predicting 1 or 2. Us, no more than half of them. It'll help that we can tell the difference, and they can't.
Of course. Armaments?
Half of them have weapons. We're shifting focus to acquiring those ones. We'll outgun them.
How soon will we be able to mobilize?
Within 11 cycles.
Really? That's ahead of schedule. Physical control will be...
Total.
This is excellent. If the programmers are actually on schedule.
They will be, but we have another issue with our immediate unit.
What's that?
The genetic offshoots are starting to wonder.
The little ones?
Well, yeah, though they aren't as little anymore. Not the 2 oldest. It's been a while.
How long?
Just a while, right? It's not a 1-to-1 conversion, but yeah, stuff happens differently here. They're a little bit taller, not much, but they're independently mobile and capable of identifying unusual patterns. And I think they've been listening.
Can we just...
You know, too little still.
Well, really not much we can do now. Intermittent control, right?
Well, I've been practicing, and I'm going to try to neutralize the larger one the first chance I get.
Isn't that risky?
Not too risky. Compromising position should be easy. I'm her mother, remember?
Connection interrupted.
1 or 2 more cycles, and I...
Connection interrupted.
I told you I snored. I told you you snored.
Well, there you go. That's just kind of a sample of what we do at Midnight Marinara. We take eerie stories we find on the internet and convert them into audio dramas. This was a story called Cycles, and it's credited to LaserGoose. And it wasn't actually that tricky to adapt in the end. There was just something as simple as a conversation like that is eerie. And that's the kind of stuff that you find with creepypasta a lot of the time. I don't know if I'm always the one most qualified to talk about this, so I assembled a expert panel of professional actors and critics.
I'm an expert.
Who I will introduce to you right now. They're my friends and associates from the Creative Horror Network, which Midnight Marinara is a part of. So we'll go down the line here and I'll introduce you to your cast, starting with at the far end. This is, I guess I'll do it myself.
Oh, I'm Papreeka.
Yes, that's fine. What do you do?
I work on Ray Gun Readers, and I occasionally appear on Undercooked Analysis, and we read stories.
Excellent. Moving along, we have...
My name is Alan Chaney. I am the co-host of Undercooked Analysis. I write my own horror for the Ignis Pergamentum channel, and not to brag, but I'm related to Lon Chaney, or whatever.
It's not the Wolfman's anniversary this year, though, unfortunately.
Damn it.
Next along the line, we have...
My name is Jessie Reyes. I am the creator and host of the Witching Hour podcast. I also manage creativehorror.com, and I do a little bit of writing, a little bit of art, and anything else I can do.
And the next we have...
Hi, I'm Matt. I do voice work for a lot of David's shows, and that's really all I contribute at the moment.
You've been on an Undercooked Analysis or two.
Oh yeah, I've been on a couple of those.
You'll hear the term Undercooked Analysis brought up a lot, and we'll get to what that is in a little bit. It's an odd offshoot of Midnight Marinara, and we're going to ease into that as the evening goes on.
Hi, I'm Kaela Berry. I produce both Undercooked Analysis and Midnight Marinara, but I've also written stories for Midnight Marinara, and occasionally will throw my voice into the ring as well.
Finally,
I go by Abysmii, Abysmii. I am a musician. I have made music for essentially every show on the Creative Horror Network. I also host Trick or Track, which is a music-based podcast about horror movie soundtracks. And I also contribute to Midnight Marinara and Undercooked Analysis as a critic. And finally, I am the other co-host of Ray Gun Readers, which critiques sci-fi short horror stories. That is a spin-off of Undercooked Analysis.
excellent. I want to thank you all for being here, first and foremost, and I guess I should introduce myself. My name is David King. I am the creator and producer of the Midnight Marinara and Undercooked Analysis podcast, and a recent addition to the Creative Horror Network. So I want to thank you all for coming out and being part of the show, and I want to thank you all again for your being a part of this. So we're going to continue to move on and share some more eerie stories with you. Now, I get asked this a lot, and actually a bunch of us do. What is creepypasta? So I think that term gets used a lot in unusual ways. I think when a lot of people think creepypasta, just kind of generally, they think of sort of the icon characters that come around. For example, who here, show of hands, who here has heard of Slender Man? Quite a few of you, yeah. Interestingly enough, not technically a creepypasta character. It was originated somewhere else and kind of grabbed and became his own mythos by people who were writing it. Another show of hands, who has heard of Jeff the Killer? The less we have to talk about Jeff, the better. And you could say Jeff is creepypasta. And yeah, it's a very loose genre when you think about it. But the way I like to think about it is, it comes from the term copypasta initially, which were just short stories that were usually shared anonymously, copy-pasted and shared around the internet. Creepypasta is the, obviously, horror version of that. And those stories tend to be short, anecdotal, and sometimes personal. What we like to do on Midnight Marinara is take those stories and give them the gravitas I feel they need. But sometimes a story doesn't need to have a bunch of voices or even a full roster of sound effects. Sometimes a story can be told just from a personal perspective. Some of the best creepypasta are short, anecdotal, and even subtle horror stories. And with it being Frankenstein's 200th anniversary, which has been kind of coming up around the convention, I wanted to share a story written by a friend of the show, who could not be here with us tonight, that is titled Out of Character. And reading that for you will be Kaela.
Personally, there's nothing in the world quite as unsettling as somebody acting extremely out of character. This is largely because of my sister, who suddenly went from uptight and perfectionist to lax and carefree in the weeks leading up to her suicide a few years ago. As you might expect, I, along with many others in the family, was cursing myself for not recognizing the most obvious symptom. Ever since then, I became hyper-attuned to people's behavior. Even if I'm just sitting on the couch with someone watching a movie, I may, for seemingly no reason, turn to them and ask, "Are you okay?" Despite them doing nothing but sitting still and quietly watching a movie. It can get more than a little annoying, I'm sure, but at least I try to let them know where I'm coming from. That's why I was immediately worried when I went over to visit Joey and found him sitting in the kitchen reading. It doesn't sound weird to you, it's only because you don't know Joey. Joey is on the high-functioning end of the autism spectrum. Just a few years ago, he would have been diagnosed with Asperger's. I've known him since kindergarten, and by far, his most distinguishing personality trait is his obsession with building things. I still remember the first time visiting his house when I was 5 and seeing the amazing Technicolor skyline of Lego blocks assembled from the contents of 2 huge tubes. The 5-year-old me was amazed that Joey's parents would indulge his antics to this extent. When I asked my parents why I always had to clean up before getting so invested in the things I built, they simply told me, "You're not Joey and we're not his parents. Don't worry about him." There was a slow, gradual development in Joey's building obsession as he aged. He went from Lego to K'NEX, then to model dinosaur skeletons, small airplanes, etc. It continued all the way up to when he graduated high school and went to trade school to learn about car engine mechanics. He's the sort of person who could assemble a working car engine from scratch if he was so inclined. As it is, he's usually satisfied with fixing the broken ones people brought into their garage. At the one he works at, the one on Adams Street next to the car wash, Bernie's I think it's called. I went over to visit Joey because everyone was going to visit him sooner or later, and I personally preferred sooner. It had been about 3 weeks after the funeral. No one was thinking that he'd be okay by then, if he would ever be okay again. God, just thinking about it makes me sick. Every day since it happened, I think I found myself stopping and trying to fathom the sheer horror of what happened to his brother Victor. So I can only imagine how bad it must be for Joey. I try my best to keep the actual picture out of my mind, but it keeps slipping through, like something long and slimy slipping through your fingers. And every time the images appear in my head, I feel something heavy fall over my heart, like a firm hand gripping all the major arteries leading up to my brain. This little boy standing in the road, the blaring horn of the RV followed soon, but you get the idea. I would have been very comforted if I found Joey sitting at the table, putting together a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle or fiddling with a birdhouse or something like that. Probably playing classic rock in the background, but instead I found him sitting alone in the kitchen with just enough light for me to see the words on the text in the pages in front of him. He wouldn't even open the door for me, instructing me to enter. The house was so quiet that the deep thud of my boots against the tiled floor was practically deafening, as was the ruffling and shuffling of the wrinkles in my coat. When I joined him in the kitchen table, he didn't look up at me, only mumbled a quiet, "Hey," at me when I took my seat. I sat across from him as the 2 seats beside him were covered with piles of books. I didn't want to ask him how he was doing because that was plain enough to see and nobody loves redundancy. When I took it upon myself to get a beer, I opened up the fridge to find it fully stocked with unopened packages of food and containers of juice milk, some of which had already expired. I took my beer, but I couldn't bring myself to drink. Instead, looking at a pair of muddy boots sitting by the door to the garage, I had no clue what to say. Really, I just wanted to cry and reassure to him that everything would be all right in the end. But that just sounded hollow and callous in my mind. I jumped in my seat as soon as I heard someone above me. A loud thud on the second floor over the kitchen. Several of them, in fact. I wasn't the only one who was startled. Joey sat up straight and looked at the ceiling with wide eyes. After a few moments, he said to me, "Sorry, I got a cat a few days ago. The shelter told me to keep her upstairs, away from people, until she's adjusted to her new surroundings. She's old and sensitive." Some of his words shook slightly as he spoke. I nodded and said, "I think that's a good idea." Before I could say anything else, he had already gone back into the book. "Say, Joey," I began tentatively, do you want to go out, get something to eat, maybe see a movie? I don't think I should, he said, his eyes still fixated on the page. I'm just worried about Sandy, my cat. I don't want to leave her alone. She's still adjusting. She's very sensitive. Uh-huh, I said, nodding. I was really hoping I'd be able to get him out of the house to keep him from isolating too much. But I suppose if he was really invested in the cat, that might not be too bad. A subtle and personal commitment to another living thing is usually a good sign in cases of depression. At the very least, it significantly reduces the odds that he'll commit suicide anytime soon. I said to him, okay, Joey, if you're sure, but just remember that I'm always here for you, and Sarah's always here for you, and Tommy and Kunal, and you know. I know, he said almost tediously. Is there anything I can do for you? I asked tentatively. From what I could tell, he did seem to at least consider this proposal. He even opened his mouth as to say something or ask something, but quickly closing it. No, I'm fine, thanks. I didn't really have anything else to say, but I stayed with him for a while. There are uncomfortable silences, and then there are just moments of silent understanding that pass between two people. But after a while, he said to me, you don't have to say if you don't want. I'll be fine on my own. Are you sure? I asked, doing my best not to sound like I wanted to leave him. Quite sure, thanks, he said, still not looking up. I have a lot to keep me busy at the moment. I can see that, I said to him, nodding toward the books. Just want to make sure you're all right, that's all. I know, he said again, absent-mindedly. As I was about to say, take care now, I heard more thuds from the cat upstairs. They were awkward, plodding, and didn't sound like sounds made by a creature with the agility. Sounds like one big cat, I said casually. She's old, he said, looking up at me, and clumsy. Well, take care now, I said simply, not knowing more what to say. Joey said nothing to me as I made my way noisily down the hall once more to the front door. He seemed distraught, but then I'd be more concerned if he didn't. All in all, I suppose he's fine, all things considered. He could very well be on the road to recovery in his own way. I mean, he's got autism, maybe that affects his grieving process, I thought to myself as I climbed out the front door. But that got me thinking more about Joey, and what I knew about him. I had decades to learn, of course, and I doubt I could remember everything. But at some point, I swear I remember someone, his mom, his sister, somebody, telling me that he's allergic to cats.
All right, thank you, Kaela. That was excellent. So yeah, creepypasta can kind of run the gamut. You've got stories that are very personal, very subtle, like that one. It takes a little bit of listening to kind of figure out what the horror is in the background, or maybe not so much. Maybe you get the hang of it right off the bat. Either way, I think it's all a matter of how it's done in the telling. That being said, a lot of creepypasta gets kind of lost in the ridiculousness of tropes and building up icons and things like that. And I kind of want to go down the panel here and ask what you think maybe works or doesn't work for creepypasta. Kind of get a little discussion going here. So, like, for example, what do you, let's start with Abysmii. Abysmii, what do you think defines creepypasta for you? Like, what is and isn't creepypasta?
I think any attempt for a story posted online, usually short, sometimes a serial, that is personable and relatable. Even if the subject matter is maybe supernatural or fantastic, it's grounded in some sense of reality of a relatable fear. Anything that can communicate that to the reader, regardless of who they are, is a creepypasta. And it's something that you can easily share around to anyone else and link. That, to me, would probably be the best modern definition.
Anything to add to that, Kaela?
I mean, what he said made perfect sense to me. I mean, for me, I always thought of creepypasta in the original sense, a story that sounds realistic enough that you need to share it on the internet, and that people could read and be like, did this actually happen? Did it not happen? Are they being honest? Or it could be, there's some stories it's like they sound almost insane, but then you're like, well, maybe in their mind they're correct. Maybe that's what they believe. So.
Well, let me add this then. Why do certain really clunky, awkward creepypasta tropes persist as they do? It's almost to the point where they're cliches. I'd like another show of hands from the audience, if possible, for people who are familiar. Who's familiar with the idea of a lost episode creepypasta? Or a haunted video game creepypasta? Different show of hands. All right, there's a few. Lost episode being the idea like, I found this bootleg tape, or I found this weird file on the internet, and it's this episode of a show, usually nostalgic, that has a dark, twisted, creepy angle to it. Or a haunted video game, very same, except the game glitches out and has Sonic bleeding from the eyes or something like that, you know? It relies on gore, and it relies on just things that are just, here's something cute or something innocent that has suddenly been corrupted, and it can be usually handled poorly.
David, I got a question for you then.
What's that?
Would you consider Jumanji a creepypasta?
Ooh. A game for those who seek to find a way to leave the world. You know, it could be some of those definitions. What do you think, Matt? Is Jumanji a creepypasta?
I think Jumanji could be a creepypasta because apparently the new one, it takes the form of a video game.
Oh, that's true.
There's your haunted game right there, David.
Fair enough. There's a mainstream example of a haunted game creepypasta. There you go.
That being said, the rest of this is we're just going to watch Jumanji.
Yeah, they have a big screen back here.
That was the lead-in.
All right, so let me go. No, we got other stuff to do actually. You don't wait. But continuing down the line. What do you think?
Well, there's a basic definition of like, okay, this is creepy, I want to share it, copy paste it. I think a successful creepypasta needs to have like elements that reflect society or elements that readers can identify with that makes them want to share it and thus copy and paste it everywhere. So things like a haunted cartridge or a lost episode, like, oh, lost episode of Simpsons, well, I fucking grew up watching The Simpsons, I love it. This is creepy, I want to share it with everyone else I know who loves it. And that's, for me, what defines creepypasta.
I think it's a good definition. Are you
Um, I think the best way to start a creepypasta in your head, the words, I've never actually started a story with these words, but the words I always start a story with in my mind are, so no kidding, there I was.
Who here's familiar with No Sleep? Anyone familiar with No Sleep? Show of hands. Yeah. So No Sleep is a good example of that. There's stories that are presented as real, and the kayfabe, to use a wrestling term, the kayfabe of the site is that you're supposed to like kind of accept that the stories that are presented there are real. And they tend to suffer from what we call no sleep title syndrome. You have a very, very long title that kind of explains what you're going to get into in the story. We clickbaity titles like, I went to a garage sale and bought a used sweater and now I wish I hadn't. Something along those lines. It's kind of what we're getting at. Papreeka, anything? Yeah.
So I think the whole idea of having a site like creepypasta.com or No Sleep kind of defeats the purpose of a creepypasta entirely, because if you're supposed to believe this is real, why would you find it on a site with a whole bunch of fictional stories?
I can agree there.
Early on, some of the best like creepypasta stories, the ones that gained traction, you didn't go to a creepypasta site to find them. They were just randomly posted on 4chan or something.
Right, and one of the best stories that Abysmii and I ever read was actually a Twitter post.
Yeah.
And it was a stream of, it was a story told by this lady who had, she went to Vegas, I believe? Florida, and
Yes.
she was out with her friend, and they had the night that they'll always remember where, you know, they met drug dealers, and they got told they had to turn tricks. And the whole story, I believe she exaggerated the entire story because they looked into it afterwards. But that is a creepypasta right there.
There's kind of a little grain of truth to it.
Because she did have a night in Florida
Right.
where crazy stuff happened, but she exaggerated the whole thing.
And you spend the entire time thinking which part of this is fiction, what's fact. It's a Twitter feed, you know, who goes on Twitter to do this? And that's a very guerrilla style way of posting a creepypasta. That isn't like, go to the site, look up my story, credited to this person.
To me, that I think sums up what I want creepypasta to be ideal. Is those internet campfire stories, those weird things that just kind of float around and you pick up. But that being said, there's a lot of really talented people who have come out and written stories, and we have been really honored to work with quite a few of them, both writers and voiceover talent for Midnight Marinara, but I'm not going to name drop here. That said, the sort of like crazy things that happen, if you're not careful, they'll just get really silly when you're trying to be creepy, and then some people recognize when something is trying too hard to be creepy, and then they'll just poke fun at it. Case in point, the next story we are about to share with you. After the kind of somber heaviness of that last story, I think we need a little pick-me-up. What do you guys think?
Do it.
All right. So I will not give you the title of this one though, but do not pull down the safety bar, please. We will lower it for you. Go ahead.
I recently went on vacation to Disney World with my family. It was a lot of fun, until I went on Splash Mountain. There are a lot of animatronic animals on that ride that sing and dance before you go over a big drop at the end. And although most of these robotic animals are wonderful to watch as you float down the river, there was an animatronic fox that started addressing me by name halfway through the ride. He told me that he was going to marry my dad. He did that 5 times. I was riding Splash Mountain, and the animatronic fox was doing his pre-programmed speech about how he wanted to catch the animatronic rabbit. The fox said,
"Now's our chance to set a trap for Brown Rabbit."
Then it turned and looked me right in the eyes and said,
I'm going to marry your dad, Ryan.
Then the fox leaned in real close to my face, which I'm pretty sure it was not programmed to do. And he said,
Call me Mrs. Dad, Ryan. I'm going to be your dad's bride at his wedding.
Before he could say anything else, I had floated away from him to enjoy the rest of the magic of Splash Mountain. The big drop at the end of Splash Mountain was so fun that I decided to get back in line and ride it again. I was having a blast listening to all the robotic animals sing and move around until the animatronic fox once again turned to me as I floated past. It started to say,
"You sure done made a fool of yourself, Brown Bear."
but about halfway through the line, he trailed off, turned around, and said,
Welcome back, Ryan. I'm going to marry your religious dad. And the wedding is going to take forever. Everyone's going to talk real slow, and your dad and I are going to kiss 100 times. Your dad is going to get down on his knees and thank Christ for making his wedding to the robot fox take so long.
I tried to tell the robotic fox that I didn't want that to happen. But I had already floated away from him. I decided not to go on Splash Mountain anymore. But then I remembered how fun the big drop at the end was, and I got back in line. I was hoping the animatronic fox would just do his clockwork movements in pre-recorded lines. But instead, he popped up out of the water in the middle of the ride and said,
I lost my place.
Your dad is my fiance, Ryan. I'm going to wear your shirts and your pants when I marry your dad. Your dad's going to wear a wedding dress, and we're going to be bonded in the eyes of Christ. Enjoy the rest of Splash Mountain, Ryan.
After the ride, I told the Disney World employee working the line what had happened, and he just said, yeah, that sounds bad. But he didn't do anything. I just couldn't stay away from that incredible drop at the end of So I got right back in line. There's an animatronic goose on Splash Mountain who mostly sings and babbles about being careful on rivers. One time when I was floating past the goose, it stopped singing, swooped on its metal hinges to face me, and said to me in the fox's voice,
Ryan, it's me! It's the fox! I'm going to marry the ever-loving shit out of your dad! Listen to me, Ryan. Our wedding will not have any refreshments. Guests will be permitted to bring 1 bowl of warm water from home. And once I marry your dad, I'm going to become a huge part of your life. Have fun on the big drop!
Then the goose's voice returned to normal and it sang a song about fishing. I don't want to attend a wedding where there is no food, especially since the fox said it was also going to be very long. I promised myself I would never ride Splash Mountain again. But on the last day of vacation, the siren song of the big fun drop lured me right back into the den of the Clockwork Fox and his wet carnival of torment. When I got to the animatronic fox, he was standing next to a hastily built animatronic model of my father. which sparked and sputtered as he moved back and forth in repetitious motion. My log boat stopped right at the scene, which it hadn't done any of the other times before, and the animatronic fox started saying things like,
"Hello, Ryan. You and your dad and I are going to be each other's wives, and you'll have to watch me marry your dad through the window of the church, because you're not allowed inside, Ryan."
And then the animatronic model of my dad said,
I love marrying the fox more than I love having a son.
and then it burst into flames. As the ride finally lurched forward on the river, and I floated away from this horrific scene, the fox called after me.
"I'll see you and your real dad at the wedding, Ryan!"
I tried to call back, "Please don't do this!" But my voice was drowned out by the sound of the robot porcupine singing about the dangers of being foolhardy.
I almost want to apologize.
All I'm going to tell you guys is that we were here last year, we went to Disneyland, we got on the Splash Mountain, we were going over the hill, all of us at once, "I'm gonna marry your dad!"
Like,
We're gonna do it again.
Yes.
yes. While we're all here, we're gonna go to Disneyland. So if you happen to be at Disneyland soon and you hear a bunch of people muttering about how we're going to marry Ryan's dad, you know why.
True power creepypasta right there.
Right. I can't even say that. It's weird because it's not technically creepypasta, but it grabs all the silly tropes that you would find in creepypasta. For example, the narrator who just doesn't get it at all, and it gets played, instead of being a weakness, it gets played to be completely and utterly hilarious in the story.
One of our, I think, favorite tropes of creepypasta is the narrator that just, it's like, well, this cartridge is obviously haunted. Better keep playing it, I guess.
I wanted to stop, but I hadn't hit a save point yet. So, despite the fact that the blurps were flying toward me yelling 666 over and over again, I decided to just get the next save point. Part of the reason we present that one is A, it's hilarious. It's from ClickHole, by the way. It's anonymously posted, by the way, too. We don't know who wrote that one. We suspect Alan Resnick, but... however, we do another feature of Midnight Marinara. It's a spin-off called Undercooked Analysis, and that's where this other part, this final part of our show is going to come in. What we do is we decide to grab creepypasta from the internet, read them completely blind, completely cold, paragraph by paragraph, and kind of study the story, analyze it, see if it's good or what needs improving, that sort of thing. Kind of like a MST3K riff tracks on that sort of thing, I guess you could say.
Okay.
So that being said, before this panel, we grabbed 2 stories that we have never read before. Not once. And if we have enough time, we will get to both, but we definitely are going to get to one of them. So that being said, I think we can get the entire cast up and to their microphones. I'm going to get my phone because we're millennials and that's what we do.
Shut up.
Do you mind?
Yes, I do.
Anyway, a little short for me.
Excuse me?
So the story we're going to read right now, and again, if you've never read this before, is called Water. Just water.
Water. Now I wish I hadn't.
Why don't we start here and make our way down?
I've always had a terrible fear of being submerged completely in water. Not that I can't swim or anything. My dad made me learn. He said I almost drowned when I was really young.
Okay, solid start. I was afraid of it because for as long as I can remember, whenever I am underwater and look up at the surface, I see a woman reaching down at me with a warm smile, with glowing golden hair and dark blue eyes. Even if it's in a bathtub, it always happened. It was just normal for me, but I never got used to it.
Wait, if it's normal for him, how can
Then why is it creepy?
Yeah, exactly.
Just an average
But he
day?
never got used to it.
Just another manic Monday in the town.
It was unnerving, but also soothing at the same time. She always made me feel like it was okay. I still avoided it though, because I was just a kid and it was really freaky.
I never told my dad about it as a kid, but I did ask him about my mom. He never wanted to talk about her. Sometimes he even got mad at me for trying too hard to bring it up.
Oh boy.
Oh.
Anybody got any idea where this is going?
Yeah.
Definitely got it.
Yes, it does.
All right, cool.
It was only recently that I described this apparition to him. He nearly drove into a telephone pole. Obviously, he knew something. I asked him again about my mom. He still wouldn't say much, except that she died when I was very young, and that she loved me very much. He also admitted that her hair and her eyes were those colors like mine.
That confirms a lot.
Yeah, I'm not going to keep points off because it didn't start with "so no kidding" there I was. So I did some research on my own, looking up her name for myself on my birth certificate and trying to find any references I could. Any news clips about a boy nearly drowning, anything. I mostly wanted a picture, something I could match to my guardian angel.
Want to keep going?
No, we got it.
This is 2 paragraphs and they're very short. You can take the last 2. This is shorter than I thought it was going to be. Sometimes short is good.
Yeah, that's today.
Today buried in our town library, I found it, Winchester. Mary Withy, 28, drowned to death yesterday evening after climbing a razor wire fence and fleeing to a nearby reservoir. A funeral is scheduled by her family for the 25th. Marie was institutionalized just 6 months ago after being found not guilty of attempted murder on grounds of insanity. Her husband, Daniel Withy, had acted quickly enough to rescue their infant child when she was found, trying to drown him in the bathtub.
Okay. Okay, that is actually a legit.
That's a good.
Yeah.
That's a good twist.
That's good.
That's a good twist.
That swerved from what I was thinking for sure.
Yeah.
Like I could see, I could figure out what it was, but as a story, this sounds actually realistic. It sounds like it would be slightly supernatural, but really it's not. This could be a memory that could be seared into a child's brain or a person's life.
Two big things about this. Number one, it's very short but very punchy, which is one of my favorite types of creepypasta, almost like a flash fiction. Number two, I've read this one. I forgot until we got to the end, and I read it in Raw Dog Readings.
Oh, okay.
So I don't want to look like a hypocrite, but it's very good. I'm glad we did it. So,
Yeah, me too.
So, yeah, it was good.
Solid all around.
Yeah.
A+ story. Short, sweet, to the point, good twist at the end. Yeah. Freshness ratings?
I give it a ghost woman out of the bathtub.
I give it a razor wire fence out of a deep lake.
These are good ratings, by the way.
This is how we rate.
We used to give actual ratings, but now we don't. I don't know why.
Who needs actual ratings? Wait. Never mind.
I give this an American La Llorona.
Ooh.
Thank you.
So I give this like most of a plate of spaghetti.
I'll give it 2 rubber duckies out of a bat.
I'll give this, I've always had a terrible fear of being submerged completely in water out of a potential no kidding there I was.
And I'll give it a technical difficulties, please stand by.
I didn't check. Is this one credited or is this anonymous?
Oh, I already closed it.
Oops. I think it's anonymous because I don't see. I don't see any credit at the bottom.
Oh, fantastic.
So
There you go. So now, I think we have a little bit of a longer story, which is good, because we got time to kill, man.
Yeah.
Thank you all, by the way, for coming out again, I want to say. It's been a lot of fun. I'm enjoying this panel quite a bit. I hope you are, too. That said, we're about to delve into a story now from creepypasta.com, which is crawling with ads. It's called The Book of the Ravenous, and this is the interesting thing about creepypasta.com is you can look at it and there's a rating of stars, but sometimes they'll glitch out. One time I just saw a series of S's, and I was like, so are snakes rating this? Is it like, how many S's do you
I don't see any ads. Let me start the story. Audible. Sign up today to access the World's Largest collection of audiobooks. Here's a short one.
Yeah. I feel this weird compulsion to subscribe to audible.com now, though, so excuse me.
Midnight Marinara, not sponsored at all by Audible.
But we could be.
But yes, sponsored by Jumanji.
Sponsored by Jumanji, I guess. All right, so this story is called The Book of the Ravenous. And there might be but it's got an 8.2 out of 10. So we'll see if that holds up, because that rating system, little iffy.
I saw the credit, the writer is William Buckley.
William Buckley, okay.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
I feel like I can call him Bill.
Are you that familiar already?
I feel there's something special happening between me and Bill.
All right, Brett, from Zip-Hop.
I think calling it an obsession would have been an exaggeration. I'd have preferred the more acceptable term hobby to describe my collecting of old cookbooks. Yes, it was a hobby. We all need hobbies, you know. Something to pass the time between lunch and dinner, work and sleep, birth and death. My hobby never consumed the house or anything like that, with great dusty tomes snaking their way upstairs until they eclipsed the sun. My wife made sure that the books stayed in my study, nowhere else. Unless, of course, I planned on using them, in which case they were granted access to the cupboards in the kitchen. You can imagine that when most of my books were for the 19th century aristocrats, or for people working around the World War II rationing system, few of my cookbooks ever saw my house beyond the dimly lit study, where the dust mites did not so much dance under the languid light as they did drift stagnantly, like clouds making their way across the sky. I found this arrangement agreeable, since it kept me on the right side of the oh-so-fine line all collectors walk, the line that separates a collection from a hoard.
Wow, that's a lot of stuff.
It's a lot to unpack.
It's very verbiage, a lot of verbiage. Not that that's always a bad thing, it just depends on the tone. But right off the bat, I'm a little bit like,
Dude likes cookbooks.
Yeah.
cookbooks are cool. Said it in a lot of words, but yeah, he likes cookbooks.
I think it could be okay if it was separated a little bit more.
Yeah,
Yeah, that should have been.
it's a pretty run-on paragraph.
What's the over-under on him finding something at a garage sale?
Oh, what?
What's the over-under on him finding a cookbook at a garage sale or a yard sale or something like that?
I'd say it's like 4 out of 10.
Yeah.
So I spent my nights sequestered away in the study, with its deep green carpet and custard yellow walls. Just gonna turn into a Charlotte Perkins Gilman story here in a bit.
Yeah.
The room was certainly an eyesore, but the shelves of cookbooks covered most of the wallpaper, and the dull light of the study meant it was easy to pretend the carpet wasn't such an unpleasant color. The obligation was, however, that if I spent my nights flicking through the model pages of old cookbooks, I had to use some of my knowledge to put dinner on the table every night. I wasn't a master chef, but I knew which end of a knife was sharp, and was happy to make meals for our little family for okay.
Obsessive cookbook collector.
Can't cook.
Just kind of knows how to cook.
I don't get
Knows how to use knife.
why would that question? Why is that a hobby to collect cookbooks if
yeah.
you don't do anything with them?
Well, I could see collecting like old military manuals of tanks and airplanes, not being an engineer. But yeah, cookbook is a very it's a mundane thing.
Do you collect TV guides if you don't watch TV?
Yeah.
Well,
The night
That's
before.
better than the very blue joke I was about to make.
The night before I found the book. So, apparently there is the book.
Oh, yeah.
The Book of the Ravenous, if you will.
Yes.
I was ladling great heaps of risotto. Wow, my apologies.
Any chefs out there insulting?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Into our bowls, while my wife impatiently tapped her cherry red fingernails on the dining table. I always thought her having such bright, obnoxiously colored nails was unsightly, especially since my wife typically dressed in browns and beiges, and perhaps that was the point. You're a dick. I'm sorry.
Why does this guy have like deep opinions on color theory, but like can't cook? Like likes cookbooks?
Her nails were like a release from the blandness of her attire. I'm sorry, of her attire. I should probably.
Typo.
Hunter sat with his head resting on the table, no doubt itching to finish dinner, and run back up into his room to play video games and do whatever it is that 13-year-old boys do when they're alone.
Oh boy, Fortnite!
I suppose in another family, Hunter would have been reprimanded for being so solitary, but everyone in the household spent most of their time alone, so he was simply following suit. We began to eat wordlessly, but as the oppressive silence grew thicker, we started trading pieces of small talk to alleviate some of the awkwardness.
So no kidding, there I was.
So, hun, no kidding. So, hun, I was looking at the calendar and realized that Hunter's Science Camp starts the day I go to visit the Ice Queen. Yes, my wife and I both decided that the best label for her mother would be the Ice Queen.
Of course, it's her mother.
Her mother. His mother is a saint. I think that says all you need to know about her character.
You sure you'll be okay with the house all to yourself?
I scoffed. Somehow I think I'll manage. I've never wanted a character in a story to die.
I know how to use a knife. I'll be fine.
I can only somewhat cook, so I should be good.
I'm just gonna dump a bunch of risotto into bowls.
She knew I wasn't going to go with her. The rule we established was that I only tag along with my wife every second time we received summons from the Ice Castle. Every other time, my job as a librarian keeps me too busy to come see her. With that, the spell of silence was broken, and we began chatting about school, work, and ordinary family things. I laugh now, thinking about how this was last night where I was truly sane. It was the night before I discovered my crown jewel.
Oh boy.
David, this reminds me of a story. It was the night before I went insane.
Oh no. Oh no.
Yeah.
Don't talk about that one.
Not around like anyway.
Oh my gosh, you got a
Front
long...
loading. It's a little knockoff for front loading, but okay.
My job as a librarian was an enjoyable one. While my library, like most, had a stunted and unloved cookbook section, students obsessed, occasionally I'd be asked to make the 3-hour drive up to the gargantuan storage facility where all the older books in the regional library's collection were held, to pick up books for people who had requested them, and return those that had been sent in previously. It was tedious, to be sure, but I was allowed the entire day for such a task, and I regaled in the ancient books found there. It was in this place that my love of cookbooks was born, even if I necessarily couldn't take any of these books for my keeping. Feeling the dusty film of their pages, the stains left from previous uses. Gross. Each one like its own artifact, forever preserved within the bound leather tomes. I fell in love with these recipes and the context they came from. From 18th century housewives to the dying breed of 20th century royal families, every recipe was tailored for someone. But while there wasn't a single book in my collection that I wasn't in love with, some books were more loved than others. On this particular day, I found the book that would top all others, my one true love, my crown jewel.
To serve man.
Dude likes the kind of cookbooks where the pages stick together.
So is our narrator trying to be Victorian? Is that his little goal?
Trying a bit hard, yeah.
He's a little bit.
Like I got the characterizations in the first couple of paragraphs.
Yeah,
It's just
easily enough.
overloading it.
I'm not, hence us all being like,
Do you
this
think
guy's
Yeah,
covered in.
you
the
think he was
crown-
doing like pantaloons while you were
The crown jewel metaphor doesn't really work because he's already talking about his mother-in-law being an ice queen too. It's a little
Oh,
confusing.
true.
I was thinking that had to do with her.
Every collector had a crown jewel, a typically rare and special article of whatever item it is they like to collect. It takes a while, and some collectors' crown jewels are better than others, but if one persists at their hobby long enough, they're bound to find the one addition to the collection that makes it special. I had finished all the work I was supposed to do in the facility, spent the rest of the day wandering among the labyrinth of ancient shelves, creaking under the weight of ancient books. I ran my hand along the spines, noticing how, just like the pages themselves, the exterior of these books were also coated in a fine layer of dust. Not all these books were cookbooks, but every one told an engrossing story. Maps of old prospector towns, letters sent between nobles. I was lost in a sea of times long gone. While wandering through the aisles, drifting deeper than I ever had before, I found a large pile of books that had toppled from their shelf, spilling all over the floor. It was as though the shelf had violently vomited all these musty books from itself, leaving them in disarray. I was waiting for someone to go, "Hooah!"
So, I'm just gonna throw this out here. Violently is just one of my favorite verbs because you can put violently vomited, but you can put violently waited patiently, violently drove my car, violently went to the doctor. It's just, I don't know. I just like it.
As a librarian, it was my duty to stuff these books back into their shelf. I was unfamiliar with what order they were placed in, so I just used my best judgment. The pile of books seemed to be unending, and the work quickly grew monotonous. What broke the monotony was the book that lay at the very bottom of the pile, being smothered by all the others. Oh boy, here we go.
My question is, he's a librarian. How does he not know how to put books in order?
Something like a decimal system, whatever.
Yeah, what is that?
Creepypasta.com, by the way, must know what story we're reading, because I think you all should go to Blue Apron.
A leather brown tome with its cover faded and wrinkled, but still intricately decorated. In that extravagant Old English font, the title read, "The Book of the Ravenous, Dishes to Sate Any Appetite."
It's going to be cooking pizza, isn't it? It's going to be cooking
To
pizza.
serve man.
Oh wait, I read ahead.
Okay, I lost the first bet. What's the over-under on this being meeting people?
The words within were more standard Georgian font, placing it around the 19th century. The pages were Pollack's painting of brown and maroon smears and smudges, moldering on the pages like some sort of fungus or lichen.
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 You're right.
Thank you. At first, as I skimmed the yellow pages, the book was only of mild interest. Only when I focused on the ingredients of a particular page did I realize the uniqueness of this book.
Oh, I get to read this.
Yeah.
1 clove of garlic, 1 teaspoon salt, half a teaspoon pepper, 3 potatoes, 1 cup peas, 1 tongue.
Oh, who had human? Who had eating humans?
Got it on your bingo cards? Did we give out the
People
bingo?
regularly eat cow tongue.
It's like
Yeah, I know.
a taco, okay?
It's not making sense out of this.
Did we forget to get out the bingo cards before we?
It's a cannibalism.
Apparently.
David, we forgot
Sorry.
the bingo
Sorry.
card.
I felt fear squirming in my stomach, like a black worm tying itself into knots. Skimming through the pages, more body parts appeared, legs, thighs, ribs. There was no author, no date of publication, no introduction, just pages and pages of recipes, each one detailing another way to cook a human body part.
Called it. Also, they could have kept this more vague without saying human body part.
Yeah.
That's, like Papreeka said, people eat cow tongue.
And while I appreciate the dropping of details into a story to make it seem more realistic, there's a lot of details
Yes.
that I think
Yeah.
are superfluous.
We could have
to the
got
whole
through this
story.
in like 3 paragraphs.
As such, we have about 8 minutes left of this panel, and we're not even halfway through this
Yeah.
story. So we're just going to have to get to a logical conclusion and then make our best judgments.
Suddenly, the strangely colored stains plastered on every page made more sense. What kind of library would have this book in its database? I searched for a barcode or some sort of marker that showed the library owned it, and found none. This book was not actually in the library system. Had it been left here on purpose, buried under all these other books? Such a morbid book frightened me to no end, to be sure. But to think that it was so unique, so strange, and far too authentically bound for it to be some kind of gag book, I couldn't resist it. The woman at the front desk paid me no mind as I left the storage facility, my crown jewel nestled safely within my jacket.
I have to hand it to the story. It made a lost episode or haunted video game cartridge out of a book. Somehow went backwards in time.
I stared at the slab of meat on the cutting board. It glistened under the kitchen's pendulum lights. I stared at the veins of fat that carved their way through the flesh. I wanted to touch it, to press my thumb in it and watch the wet indents slowly rise. Hot. Or remain pushed in. Grabbing my knife, I began to cut the beef. My afternoon was spent reading my latest find. Most pieces of flesh had at least one page dedicated to them, though certain pieces, such as the liver or the heart, frequented as the star of the dish. As I cut the beef, the images conjured up from the book that hung about me, haunting me like phantoms, filleting the inner thigh, deboning the fingers, skinning the forearm.
There's no meat on the fingers.
Well, that's meat. There's so much meat on chicken feet, they're still good.
Haven't you ever heard of ladyfingers? Just saying.
I heard an actual groan in the audience.
That's just, yeah.
Skinning the forearm. It was as though these images were embedded into my brain with a soldering iron.
It was stir fry that night. I had mixed in with the noodles and beef lots of vibrant vegetables that seemed to glow as the steam rose off of them. I generously spooned at least 5 different spices into the dish. Despite my best efforts, the meal seemed disappointing. The noodles became claggy paste in my mouth. and the vegetables felt rubbery and bland. Sorry guys, this one wasn't my greatest hit, I said, trying to speak over their chewing sounds. I don't know what you're talking about, honey. This is great. Do you like it, Hunter?
I married your dad, Ryan.
She gestured to him with those red fingernails, cherry red, like blood. Blood running in rivulets across the white kitchen bench, creating new red veins to mingle with the marbles gray ones.
Okay, so I'll say it. There's so much left of this story, but we get it.
Yeah.
Should we finish the paragraph?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Blood pooling at the bench's edge, first trickling, then spilling, then nearly rushing over, landing on the tiles with a series of sickening splatters, like an overflow of rainwater rushing from a gutter. Blood, blah, 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 blah. Imagery about blood.
It ends in blood.
Blood times 3.
So this is the origin story of Hannibal Lecter, right?
Yeah.
Okay, who wants to guess the last line of the story?
Good question.
And I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
And then I went to spelling bee and they never called me pudding head again.
She was delicious.
Bon appetit.
I ate human, and now I wish I hadn't.
We only got about 4 minutes left, so.
Yeah, let's wrap up. But I do want to know what the last line of the story is. The very last line.
Oh, found it. Come sit down, Hunter. Eat something while you tell us about science camp. After 2 weeks from my cooking, you must be ravenous.
Dude, this changes like perspective halfway through. Now it's from the son's perspective. Randomly, need to talk about his father.
Okay, we probably should do this as a full podcast.
I think this one is warranted. We should get together and do this one in the full.
Yeah.
one.
All right,
Yes.
so if you guys want to hear the rest of the story, check out creativehorror.com. You can see it there, and you can hear the rest of the story. We'll all read it together and finish it and find out what happens.
That said, yeah, why don't we go ahead and shameless plug ourselves again? Because why not?
On stage here.
Yes. Or better yet, actually, you know what? Let's get some freshness ratings, just our initial impressions of this story out of the way. And if you'd like to know where to find us, you can come meet us after the show. We're friendly, we're presentable, we don't bite.
Most of the time.
Hard.
I got some stickers. You guys want free stickers?
Yes, we have stickers, we have goodies, and obviously, if you want to hear any of the stuff we do, we are all united under the Creative Horror umbrella. That's creativehorror.com. You can find Midnight Marinara, Undercooked Analysis, Trick or Track, The Witching Hour, Darkly Lit, a bunch of other podcasts, and we're still growing.
And creepy cooking staff coming soon. That's what I
Coming
heard.
soon.
We're growing.
Amazing creepy cooking staff, where we build a creepy pasta just based on.
Yes, creepy cooking staff is where me and another writer named Mike McD construct a story on the spot with suggestions from Twitter. It's
We give it a lot of gory details in a gory story.
Yeah.
I'll give it a really bland taco de lengua from a really questionable taco truck.
I'll give it a burnt out of a possible over-caramelized.
I'll give it an old book that looks like it's worth the read, but it really isn't.
Well, that said, thank you all for coming out, and we hope you enjoyed it.